Well, all the college kids are back on campus. And if you thought the rage of last semester that we saw at Harvard or Columbia or basically all the Ivy League institutions has kind of tamped down, it hasn't. Not only has it tamped down, it has spread. The University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill is the latest victim, as in home of Michael Jordan. Watch this.
It's a new school year in Chapel Hill, but a familiar fight is still leaving a mark.
I was floored. I was shocked, and I was upset.
Orange County DA Jeff Neiman says this graffiti is especially galling as it popped up while officers were escorting protesters down Franklin Street.
This is completely beyond the pale, beyond any line of acceptable political discourse.
Graffiti appeared after a pro-Palestinian protest staged by several groups, including Triangle Stop Cop City. A post from the group on Instagram says the event is for all those who desire an end to this world of genocide, with the group vowing no vote will end the violence of police and prisons, of borders and settler colonialism. This demonstration and the graffiti come the same week UNC students return to classes, and just 2 days after a pair of protests organized by UNC Students for Justice in Palestine. Demonstrators then gathering both at UNC's administrative offices at the South Building and the state Democratic Party headquarters, calling on both to cut ties with Israel.
All right, joining me right now is the executive director of Speech First, Cherise Trump. Okay, since last semester, the media has been trying to squeeze this, through the tube of free speech, what we're seeing, at the same time making Elon Musk into the worst person ever born next to Donald Trump for allowing free speech on Twitter where no buildings get destroyed.
Exactly. And this is clearly a double standard. I mean, you have free speech for me, but not for you. And that's exactly how they see it. They see that they are actually committing real crimes, but calling it free speech. This is honestly something that is really appalling, especially at UNC Chapel Hill, because their SJP chapter is actually under suspension right now based on activities that took place in the spring semester where they shouted down Barry Weiss when she came to speak in January, and they did encampments throughout the spring semester. And this was grounds for them to be suspended because they didn't just violate campus policies. In North Carolina's case, they actually violated state law, which says that you cannot disrupt public events, official events, by shouting down speakers and interrupting them or disrupting them in other ways, or else you could be, essentially disciplined to the fullest extent of the law on campus. That means everything up to expulsion. And the law specifically states this. So we at Speech First had to actually push the university to actually discipline the students because they had also interrupted the Board of Trustees meetings and a number of other official events on campus by shouting speakers down. And still, all the way up until May, they weren't disciplined. Finally, they were put on suspension, but it doesn't seem to matter because lo and behold, here they are holding rallies anyway.
Look, if people want to say unpopular speech doesn't need protection, if people want to take to the public square, not blocking the public way, if they want to file for a permit to hold a rally, and they want to question law enforcement or the policies of the Netanyahu government or whatever it is, I don't have to like it. I don't have to agree with it. But that's, if there was a social contract, that's what free speech is. This is a totally different animal. And Democrats are always talking about how free speech is absolute, yet they want no crackdowns on any of this. And even NBC's standards and practice people aren't sure that from the river to the sea can be construed as really anti-Semitic, even though it's the phrase about wiping Jews off the map. It's what is free speech then?
Well, let's be clear. Universities for a very long time actually have very much struggled with respecting students' free speech. In fact, they regularly punish students, censor students, and coerce their speech when it comes to mandated uses of pronouns, punishing students for microaggressions, disbanding Turning Point chapters for holding events on whether men should be able to participate in women's sports. So universities are notorious for shutting down speech they don't like, speech they don't agree with. However, suddenly they become free speech absolutists when you have pro-Hamas protesters out there screaming in the face of Jewish students and blocking blocking them from entering the libraries. And another thing we need to be perfectly clear about is that most of this is not pure speech. Most of this is not constitutionally protected speech. It, in fact, is vandalism. It is destruction of public and private property. It is harassing conduct against Jewish students. It is encouraging, creating what are considered hostile environments where students cannot function or attend their classes. And this is also in violation of many time, place, and manner restrictions on campuses. And in the cases of private universities, they don't even have a foot to stand on because they're private. They could actually shut this down if they wanted to at any time, but they all choose not to. And I think it really shows that they agree with what the protesters are talking about. They agree with the pro-Hamas position, and this is what they've been teaching students to do the whole time.
Yeah. Okay. So let's address that. The microaggressions and the creating of a hostile or uncomfortable environment. If you have a man who has grown his hair out, he is wearing makeup, he is presenting as a woman, and you misgender that person, you have now crossed the line. But in the case of Jewish students who might be wearing yarmulkes, or Christian students who might be wearing a cross outside of their clothing, those are people who are identifying who they are. If you are attacking that, how is it any different?
Well, I think the most significant difference here is that there's actually like physical assault in a lot of these, and hostile environment is a specific legal term. It's not about whether or not the Jewish students feel uncomfortable. It is whether or not they actually can function in a safe environment without fear of actual brutality or assault or harassing conduct. That is a much more legally binding concept than just feeling like you've been offended because someone doesn't agree with your viewpoints. These students have every right, the pro-Hamas students have every right to stand up there and shout that they want the deaths of Jews. And that's really abhorrent and that's horrible. And a lot of universities also have the ability to take a position against that if they wanted to, but they all choose not to. What's important here is that you have students who actually are committing real crimes, real harassing conduct, and they're not being held accountable. There's a number of Title VI violations that are supposedly under investigation by the Department of Education's Office of Civil Rights. I have seen nothing come out of this where you've seen real clear discrimination against Jewish students when it comes to equal enforcement of the campus policies. So where's the accountability here? Universities aren't being held accountable. Students aren't being held accountable. I think it's also just important to remind students that the right to free speech does not mean the right to silence other people. You cannot shout people down. You can't tear their flyers down. Everyone on campus has that same access to speech as they do. But again, they want a double standard.
Yeah, and look, let's be honest. In other cases, people have been expelled for a whole lot less. It seems like any student that even got arrested in some of these universities have been readmitted to campus regardless of that. All right, Cherise, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.